Hello, I'm Kimberly Underwood. This is our Emerging Leaders podcast. I'm with Makana Anicas, and so glad to meet you here in Honolulu. And could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Makana Anicas, from the Hawaii island. I was born and raised on what they used to call the Big Island of Hawaii. Now they call the Hawaii Island. Went to high school there. Decided to be an engineer. Did a double major in computer engineering management at University of the Pacific. Went on to get a systems engineering degree at George Washington University, and have worked for large systems integrators like Lockheed Martin and IBM, and now work for a small hub zone company called Government Acquisitions, and live here in Hawaii supporting the DoD with technology advisement.
Oh, very nice. And then tell us a little bit about your role with AFCEA.
Sure. My role at AFCEA, I'm the VP, or now the on the board for events. I coordinate a monthly luncheon that brings the DoD commands to industry to collaborate on different technology needs for the Asia-Pacific theater. And I also help with social events to encourage networking for either people in uniform or civil servants or people from industry to look for jobs or get connected into different technology focuses that are important for our customers and soldiers out here in Hawaii, Asia Pacific, and the U.S. CONUS regions.
Right, it seems pretty unique to have these amazing technical skills on your systems engineering computing side, but yet you have these amazing kind of networking social skills. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How leaders come to you to kind of navigate things, and industry comes to you on the other side?
Sure. So I enjoy, being social. I like to go to social events. I like to meet people. I'm always out to have a good time and fun, in my profession. So there's a lot of things to do, recreational activities, nighttime activities, and just having the ability to meet people in person really excites me. So I've developed that skill throughout my career by being mentored by executives within the industry that I've supported. So it's always great to just get to know people a little better by going out to dinner or a social event, basically to form an instant connection or a deeper bond than just trying to sell something or trying to train certain type of technology. So it's become very important. And I would say for the customers, they look to me to bring in a breadth and then a depth of what the offerings in technology are leading edge, or maybe things that aren't leading edge that are becoming a little antiquated or end of life, and just keeping them ahead of the curve, or at least informed of costs, complexity, and effectiveness of the things that they'll need to purchase or acquire to better perform their mission services for our country.
Okay, very cool. And you so graciously wrote our November column for Disruptive by Design. Can you walk us through that process? What was it like? How'd you come up with the topic? And then finally to just now seeing your name and picture in print. Of course, it took me with our, slow connection. It took me a long time to pull that up. But
Sure.
Walk us through kind of doing the column.
Yeah, so first it was a little bit of a shock, but I actually enjoy writing. I used to do a lot of creative writing when I was younger, and then throughout my professional career have switched to proposal or capture management for writing to, make a point or sway, decision in your favor. So, a friend like Alicia Kelly asked and kind of prodded me a little bit and said, I think she said, "You got this." So I said, "Sure, I'll do it." This time's a very busy season for our industry. It's pretty much the end of the fiscal year. So I didn't have a lot of free time, but I, was excited and honored that you guys asked me to write about the Indo-Pacific. So it wasn't that hard for me to put my thoughts down onto paper because I interact with all the combatant commands here in the region regularly. So I pretty much summarized, and I even, before I wrote it, the final draft, or, basically the first draft was the final draft, asked them all, to kind of weigh in a little bit because I didn't want to misrepresent the climate or the direction that the region was going. So it was a summary of what all the commands are focused on from an engagement perspective, as far as deterring threats, having a teaming approach. So it's a team effort. Everybody has to work hand in hand. There's certain things that Air Force does well. There's certain things that SOCPAC does well. There's certain things that USARPAC does well. And then kind of combine all of those together. So it's really an overview. And I think the toughest thing was trying to not go into too much depth to give away, national trade secrets. But also to not make it too vanilla, where it does the reader no good. So again, the uniqueness of our region is I was born and raised here. I've worked, the East Coast globally, internationally, throughout my 15-plus career, and kind of bringing that all back, the network, the technology, and then having the intimacy with all the commands. The uniqueness is that there's representation from every command right here on island to address the entire theater. So you have USARPAC, you have SOCPAC, you have DISAPAC, PAC-F, you have MARFOR-PAC, you have NICTAMS-PAC, and I probably missed somebody in there. But, the Navy, the shipyard, it's really still a strategic geographical location, even though technology has somewhat removed or alleviated that need to be physically present all the time. It still is because of that physical presence, with nothing or not a lot of physical presence for, as you're saying, flying for the next 4 to 6 hours in either direction. It still is a very important strategic position. And then now leveraging and optimizing the technology that we have at hand to accomplish the mission, which right now is to deter conflict, is a very important thing, which from a national perspective is a lot of focus and funding being applied.
Right, sure. And what other concerns are you seeing or kind of considerations from leaders about the region and what's happening in the region?
Sure. So I think I wrote this in the article, but C2, from a comms perspective, making sure that you're talking to who you want to talk to and your communications aren't being compromised. And also taking that to, I think we also talked about this, the sense, make sense, and act methodology that is being pushed, throughout our combatant commands to make smart decisions, informed decisions, and optimizing the level and amount of information that you're processing without going too far on any end of the spectrum. That it has diminishing returns, right? So you want to optimize how much information you're gathering or sensing at the edge, and then processing it in a timely fashion, then making sure that the information isn't being compromised as you communicate it throughout. I think, depending on what day it is, there's 36 to 38 coalition partners that every command has to communicate across, and there's different protocols of sharing information depending on which country you're partnering with. to achieve the mission. So that's a huge thing. Security of comms probably would have been the faster way to say it, but
wow, you're an elegant speaker. I liked the long way. And I guess, can you kind of help paint a picture for those of us like myself who are from, mainland U.S.? This is my first time in Hawaii.
Sure.
And, amazed about the beauty and the culture of the island itself. But it really drove home just even getting here physically, how far out it is and how vast the Indo-Pacific region is. Can you kind of talk about that sense to help others understand really the vastness?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's not a huge presence. We're a state of, the United States, but we're 4 to 6 hours on a plane, to any major intercontinental landmass. And we cover, again, a wide variety of countries, languages, cultures, religions. I can't remember what the numbers are off the top of my head, but even when you narrow it down to, our primary coalition partners, in the Five Eyes, it is still a lot of complexity. And because what I've known throughout my career, the distance, the physical distance from, you call it the capital, right? The attention, the funding, the focus, or the understanding, a lot of that dissipates as you move further and further west, right? So it's very important, that there's a renewed focus on the region. There was a pivot to the Pacific probably a decade ago, and, there's another pivot to the Pacific right now. So, it's been a long time in an evolution of really putting action behind that phrase. So yeah, it's a very strategic, especially in today's day and age where the pacing threat, as they call it, is right. I don't want to say backyard, but we're the closest point from the Oconus or CONUS piece of the United States, pretty much in the middle of the largest of the, I don't want to say 7 seas or 5 major oceans in the Pacific. So, it's a large, and there's more, I would say, void, of water versus land to cover, which adds even more focus to the need for leveraging technology to cover, such a large area that isn't solid ground.
Yeah. And can you talk about emerging leaders? Kind of, what is your role for AFCEA Emerging Leaders in Hawaii? And kind of what does the group mean to you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that in Hawaii, there's been folks that have been here for a very long time. They're very committed to the mission of AFCEA, which is to bring the armed forces or the people that are warfighters or soldiers serving in the front lines to technology and technology to them so that they can better perform their mission sets and priorities. And to me, when I came back about a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, it's a change of guard, of all these folks that have been doing this role for connecting and networking an important conversation piece that turns into reality and action, which is driving technology into the front lines and beyond, and maintaining a solid base behind that, and connecting and having those important conversations and the continuity of say every 4 years. Right now we just had a huge change of command, which is a big topic or point in my article. And the civilians, at least from the industry side, are typically the ones that keep the continuity of generations past, so that you have an eye on the past, but, or understanding of the past, but an eye to the future. And so knowing what has worked, what hasn't worked, why it hasn't worked, and then passing it on to the incoming commands so that they don't have to repeat, things that have occurred or may have not worked as well, or improve going forward. That's the importance of it. And being, I don't want to say younger, I'm a lot older than I look, but on the younger end of the spectrum, and getting other emerging leaders engaged and involved has been a very important thing in the time that I've been in my VP of events role. And it's really exciting to see, younger people being deputies or becoming VPs in the organization, and being excited, just like I am, to, go into senior commands, meet with, generals and colonels and lieutenant colonels, building relationships, and then, whatever their profession is in the technology world, bringing that to bear and refining it so that it can be better utilized by our warfighters.
And kind of what of the emerging leader group, the community, what does it mean to the broader defense industrial base for members themselves and also for industry?
Sure.
And what are you bringing as an emerging leader?
Yeah, I mean, a point that I was made with one of my colleagues in the industry recently was there's not a lot of young blood in this profession because it takes a bit of time to earn credibility or security clearance, or you're talking about people or talking to people that are going downrange, being deployed to the front lines, and it's a life or death situation on the capability that you provide them, right? So in other areas, it's not necessarily a life or death situation. It's, how can this make me more money? How can I sell more of these things or widgets? And so in our profession, it takes a little bit of time to gain that knowledge or perspective of, hey, this is very important. If this equipment fails, it could be a very critical point, and lives are at cost, at stake. So, having that mission first perspective, and then also the respect for our military that, sacrifice relationships, time, their careers to make sure that we have the freedom that isn't necessarily free, and doing it in a tactful way, in a strategic manner, so that we can, be civilians and have these luxuries, I would call them, of democracy and the republic, it takes time to acquire. I wouldn't say it was something that I had when I first got into the industry, but it's something that was acquired, and then being able to feel comfortable with, this general's also human too. Yeah. He's not just, a cartoon figure or movie figure that's, always very intense, right? Like up in your face, Mm-hmm. They're regular human beings that their mission is important. And I've been blessed to be engaged with many that I've formed relationships and friendships with, because they understand that I'm not in there to sell something. Mm-hmm. I'm there to help their mission and help them succeed. And a lot of times that's connecting either cross command or cross industry to technology, or to other contacts that I might have that could, better represent a solution to whatever their priority is at the time. Most of the times, multiple. So, it's a really important. I think somebody said the skin or the fabric or the thread that keeps the fabric together, because really that's how we'll succeed, is bringing the best of the best in industry forward to the DoD. It might not be the most expensive thing, but it will be the most effective for whatever mission set that they have at the time.
Yeah. And for emerging leaders, people under 40, what's unique about that population in this time period? What are the qualities of an emerging leader?
Yeah, I think it's speed and efficiency. Maybe not always accuracy, because sometimes, the younger folks can move a little too quickly, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But, having that knowledge of what is the latest technology, what is emerging, what is... there's a lot of new things that come out all the time that I'm not even aware of. So having that younger generation kind of on that bleeding edge, I think is very important. And having grown up with a lot more technology than that I've had, and previous generations has had, there's a level of efficiency that comes with it. And then in my role, having that knowledge of where we've been, and, where our customer wants to go, is important because it can kind of help that accuracy, of that speed and efficiency that comes with youth. And just energy, having the attitude of, nothing's impossible, sky's the limit. And in my role, I've been really lucky to work with a lot of folks. I'm seeing a lot more entrepreneurial-minded, I don't want to say kids, but emerging leaders entering the DoD or the federal areas, which is, creates, I would say, efficiencies of just being able to leapfrog over things that are becoming end of life or antiquated, just because there's always a better way of doing things.
And are there any skills you think emerging leaders of today need for the future to become the leaders of the future?
Yeah, I think that, know your history, do your homework, be humble, avoid that sense of arrogance. It's very tempting, especially, I've been in that role too, of essentially railroading your vision or your preferences towards folks that, have been through the grinder or have a lot of experience, and the perception of, perhaps not moving as quickly as you'd like to move. So being a good listener, active listener, I believe is the term. Even though you have something to say, make sure that you're able to equally, if not more, absorb what your senior leadership or, people that are leading our country have to give you. Then internalize and, come back with, I don't want to say humble, but, very collaborative mindset versus a smart aleck kind of situation of this is dumb, this is slow, I know better. So come at it in a collaborative approach. Avoid what I think was referred to me as railroading people, which is just having no regard for what other people have to contribute.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Great wisdom there. And you mentioned your role at GAI. Can you talk a little bit more about being an integrator and what you do?
Sure. So GAI stands for Government Acquisitions, Inc. I joke around that, we acquire governments, but that's not really what we do. We help streamline the process of procuring or acquiring technology for the government, and also act as an extension of our business partners of over 1 million products from hardware and software in the enterprise IT world. So we can go out and procure, a tiny little widget, try to avoid the word dongle, but, sometimes we'll go and purchase a dongle for a connection that no longer exists on a laptop. And other times we'll procure large amounts of servers or hardware and software. We're a hub zone small business. and we have access to many of the larger GWACs or IDIQ vehicles. And it's because we have a good reputation, we're very efficient. When we take on a mission assignment, we deliver what we say we're going to deliver. But in essence, we're a mid-tier systems integrator for the federal government, because everybody in our company, which is about 100 to 110 folks, believe that that's our number one most important customer in the world, or now universe. So, we take great pride. We're mission focused. And again, we're that thread in the fabric that ties all the commands, all the federal government, and can deliver technology because we have great partnerships, which leads to great pricing, that we can extend to our customers. So yeah, it's great because I get to learn all the different technologies, kind of learn what the top ones in focus for cybersecurity, zero trust, ICAM, which are very important for the region where I sit, and be able to pull that through and either train, educate, or deploy to our soldiers, warfighters, or civil servants that are, I don't know if civil servants the right word anymore, but the people that work, very hard to keep our government together, and also improve on serving our end users who are, soldiers or boots on the ground or war fighters, which is important for national security.
Yeah. And so you're a bit of a technologist. That's an understatement, I would say. How do you kind of keep yourself in the know and understanding the technologies, like you said, that are rising to the top, to be able to know what's good or what is included and what components work, things like that?
Sure. I always like to have great mentors that bestow their wisdom onto me. So I also like to have somewhat of a casual approach to being a technologist. I don't just come in and start talking about low-level, deep, technology stacks, from a scientific perspective. I like to form a relationship, build a personal bond, and then, eventually, we'll be talking about, right now, a huge topic is, cybersecurity, identity management in the region. And so, having that deep technical knowledge is important because when we do need to get into the weeds and have those important conversations of how these systems integrate together and, whether or not it's overkill for, what the need is, or if it is the right level of capability to deliver the mission need, is the customer appreciates because they can trust that if I'm bringing a capability forward, it's probably the top, 3 options that they have. So being able to do market trade studies, and in proposal writing, we would call it, features and benefits, right? So you'd have a feature, which is great, and a lot of technologists can spit out stats on, size, weight, complexity, and cost, and risk to a program. But not a lot of times do they say, okay, well, so what? How does that actually help the end user deliver their capability? So, it's a really basic task, but having a features and benefits and how it addresses a requirement is a really key skill to have. And so having that deeper technical knowledge, kind of that breadth and then the depth when you need it, is very important. And again, I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything. So even knowing who in your organization, who is that subject matter expert, or somebody out in industry, or maybe even on the uniform soldier side, they might have that more direct firsthand knowledge of what will work and what doesn't work and why, and then how to improve it. So, yeah.
And any challenges you face, things that are hard, things that keep you up at night, what's the hard stuff?
Yeah, so right now, again, it's covering all the different commands. So being able to transition, there's different acronyms, there's different ranks, there's different focuses, and being able to transition quickly depending on which room I'm in, and then, link across aisles when it's necessary and say, oh, has the A6 and the J6 ever talked together? Because both of you are in the other's strategic pillar of teams or collaborative partners, and so when the answer is no, it's a good time to make a connection, and that goes with capability as well. It's not only on a interpersonal level, but a lot of times it is, especially in a change of command environment that we're in. So having those connectors in a real-time situation, because it's not always public knowledge of who's switched out from a certain role, either on an end user side or from a commanding seat.
Right. And I guess one other question: what would you like senior leaders to know about emerging leaders? Any wise wisdom you'd like to give them while being humble?
Yeah. I once won the award for being the most humble person in the world. Yeah. Just wanted to voice that. No, it's one of my long-standing jokes. But, yeah, I think that even though, we might not look the same or have as many years in life, that we do bring a lot of value. And I've been seeing more and more openness to this, this than just being, a kid off the street. And I get that because, again, I look a lot younger and, I am a lot smarter than I look, hopefully, I hope. But, having, that I think appearance is always the first impression, is something that's hopefully starting to die down. And so even though, I don't have the honor of wearing a uniform, I understand the importance of it and what it means to the people that lace up their boots every day. And then I also understand across all commands the priorities, the mission priorities, and then bringing that value of industry, of having that breadth of capability, and then bringing options to the table, I think is important. So the younger generations, I've noticed, have very specialized skills in certain areas that are, I'll just throw it out there, data processing, management of mass amounts of data, and understanding how that influences, the world from a social media standpoint. And it becomes important whether we'd like to admit it or not. And I think it's important that we recognize earlier in the process that the importance of having these younger generations engaged in, say, systems that are a little older or, again, coming to end of life. Case in point, everything that's happening in our region with social media, the amount of data that's being generated and processed, and then making sure that decisions that are being made off of that are secure and the right, align with our strategic, initiatives. So.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the problems of tomorrow and the threats of tomorrow are going to be so huge that we need to draw on the next generation of emerging leaders.
Sure.
For sure. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks so
appreciate
much.
it.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Signal Media's Disruptive by Design podcast. Please be sure to subscribe. The podcast will be available every other week at anchor.fm by Spotify. Tell your friends, family, and colleagues. And if you're not a member of AFCEA, please consider joining. Learn more at afcea.org/membership. That's afcea.org/membership. Thanks and have a good day.